Ethan hadn't believed in ghosts, not until that night. The sudden sharp sound of footsteps above him broke the silence of his dark, empty house. He froze, his heart pounding. The attic door, which he always kept locked, was creaking open. His breath caught in his throat as a shadow moved across the floor above. He knew the house was old, but it had never felt so alive before. He was alone, no one had been here for days. He tried to shake it off, telling himself it was just the house settling, but he couldn't. The steps grew louder, and suddenly, a cold gust of wind rushed down the stairs, making the hairs on his neck stand up. He stood, paralyzed, unable to move as the door creaked open further. The thought crossed his mind. Who else was here? Ethan stood there, his heart racing, unable to move as the attic door creaked open further. The shadow above seemed to stretch unnaturally, like it was growing, shifting. He took a step back, his hand instinctively clutching the railing. It's just my mind playing tricks, he thought, trying to steady his breath. But deep down something felt different. Something felt real. He wanted to run, but his feet wouldn't obey. The air in the house had grown cold, colder than it had ever been. With a nervous glance, Ethan looked towards the hallway, half expecting someone or something to appear. But no one came. Silence, thick and suffocating, descended once again. Then, as he stood frozen, a whisper echoed from above, barely audible, but unmistakably there. Ethan. It was faint, but clear. His blood ran cold. He backed away from the stairs, feeling a cold sweat break out on his forehead. There was no way he could face whatever was in the attic. Ethan had spent months alone in this house after moving in, never once feeling the slightest hint of fear. But tonight was different. His fingers fumbled for his phone in his pocket. No service. Why hadn't he noticed the attic door before? It was always locked, and yet it was now ajar. His feet moved against his will, drawing him towards the attic, each step heavier than the last. The air was colder, and the walls seemed to close in around him. Every nerve in his body screamed for him to run, but the whispering voice from above kept calling him closer, pulling him like a magnet. With every step he felt the presence growing, its weight pressing down on him. Ethan ascended the stairs, each step creaking under his weight. He felt the temperature drop with every inch. His mind screamed at him to stop, to turn around and leave, but his legs betrayed him. The whisper grew louder, now more distinct. Ethan, why did you leave me? His breath caught in his throat. There was no mistaking it, that was the voice of a woman. His pulse quickened. He reached the top of the stairs and hesitated before slowly pushing open the attic door. The space beyond was dark, except for the faintest outline of something standing motionless in the corner. The faint smell of decay lingered in the air. As his eyes adjusted, he saw it, a figure standing in the shadows, its head tilted unnaturally. You shouldn't have come back, the voice whispered again. Ethan's heart thudded in his chest as the figure in the corner shifted, its movements jerky, as if struggling to stand upright. He didn't know whether to scream or run, but his legs refused to obey. The air grew thick with a scent of decay, and the shadowy figure took a step toward him. You shouldn't have come back. The whisper was louder now, and with it an unsettling creak echoed throughout the attic, like the bones of the house protesting. Ethan's mind raced. What was happening? Who was this? He turned to run, but before he could move, the figure lunged at him, its cold, decayed hands grabbing hold of his arm with an unnatural force. I've been waiting, it hissed. In that moment, the attic door slammed shut, trapping him inside. The next morning, Ethan woke up in a cold sweat, the remnants of the nightmare still fresh in his mind. He had never experienced anything like that before. He sat up in bed, his heart racing. The attic door, which had been left ajar the night before, was now closed tightly. It must have been a dream, he thought. But something didn't sit right. The house felt different now, heavier, like it was holding its breath. As Ethan sat there, trying to make sense of what had happened, his thoughts turned to the house's history. He had purchased it only a few months ago, eager for a fresh start. But now the walls seemed to pulse with a life of their own. Was it all in his head? Or had something truly followed him from the attic? Unable to shake the feeling of unease, Ethan decided to investigate the attic. He couldn't let the fear consume him. As he climbed the stairs again, he hesitated at the top, staring at the closed attic door. His hands shook as he reached for the knob, unsure of what he might find. The memory of the whisper and the shadowy figure loomed in his mind. Was I losing my mind? He pushed open the door, wincing as it creaked in protest. Inside, the attic was exactly as it had been the night before, dark, musty, and full of old boxes. But something was different. A feeling lingered in the air, a sense that the space was not quite as abandoned as it seemed. Ethan stepped cautiously into the attic, the air thick with dust. The floor creaked under his weight as he moved deeper inside. His eyes scanned the cluttered room, old furniture, boxes of forgotten items, and a few faded photographs scattered across the floor. But then, his gaze froze. There in the far corner was a rocking chair. It wasn't there before. Ethan's pulse quickened. He took a step forward, heart pounding in his chest, the sensation of being watched growing stronger. The chair was empty, yet it seemed to move slightly, as though an invisible presence was rocking it slowly back and forth. His breath caught in his throat. No one could have placed that there, he thought. The chair's subtle movement was enough to send a shiver down his spine. As Ethan took another step forward, a cold gust of air brushed against his neck, sending a shiver through his body. His breath caught in his throat as the chair rocked a little more violently. He rushed to it, nearly stumbling over the old floorboards. As he reached the chair, it stopped abruptly, as though it had been waiting for him. His mind raced. What was going on? His gaze moved to the floor, and that's when he noticed something even more disturbing. Faint footprints, dust disturbed in a way that wasn't from his own movements, leading directly to the rocking chair. The realization hit him like a punch to the gut. Someone, or something, had been here. Ethan stood up quickly, his legs unsteady. The air in the attic seemed to thicken, as though the room itself was closing in on him. He heard the faintest sound, like the whisper of fabric dragging across the floor, followed by a soft, unintelligible voice. He whipped around, his heart hammering in his chest, but saw nothing. This can't be real, he thought. I'm just imagining it. Yet every instinct told him otherwise. The voice was real, and it was coming from somewhere close. The air grew colder still, and the whisper came again, clearer this time. Help me, Ethan. The words felt like they were being etched into his soul, each syllable seeping into his mind. He had to get out. But as he turned to leave, the attic door slammed shut on its own, trapping him inside. Ethan's heart raced as he pounded on the attic door, desperate to escape. But the door wouldn't budge, locked from the outside. He could feel the house shifting around him, as if it were alive, aware of his every move. His breathing grew shallow, the whispers in the air intensifying. Help me, Ethan. The voice repeated, growing more frantic. Panic surged through him. He backed away from the door, eyes darting around the attic, searching for any way out. The air was thick with dread, the oppressive weight of something ancient and malevolent pressing down on him. His eyes landed on a dusty mirror, leaning against the far wall. Hesitant, he stepped toward it, his footsteps echoing in the stillness. As he got closer, he saw something move in the reflection. A figure, standing just behind him, though he knew he was alone. Ethan spun around, heart thudding in his chest, but there was no one there. His mind was playing tricks on him. He was exhausted, overwhelmed by the house, the fear, the whispers. Get it together, he told himself. But the fear wouldn't let go. The figure in the mirror was gone, but Ethan could still feel its presence, like a heavy weight pressing on him. The air felt colder now, and the dust that had settled on the attic floor seemed to shift with an unnatural rhythm, as if something was moving just beneath the surface. Ethan's gaze flicked toward the attic window. The world outside seemed so far away. And yet he couldn't escape the feeling that he was trapped here, in this suffocating, decaying space. The house felt alive, and it was watching him. He had to find a way out. As Ethan turned away from the mirror, something caught his eye. A small tattered notebook lay on the floor, half buried beneath a pile of old clothes. Hesitant, he bent down and picked it up. The cover was stained, and the pages inside were yellowed with age. He flipped through it, trying to ignore the growing feeling of nausea in his stomach. The words inside were written in a hurried, frantic hand. "She's here. I can feel her watching me. I shouldn't have come here. She'll never leave. She won't stop until she takes me with her." The final page was filled with an indecipherable scrawl, the ink smeared as if the writer had been shaking in fear. Ethan felt a chill run down his spine as the words sank in. She. Who was she? Ethan's mind raced as he processed the words from the notebook. He had to find out more. The woman, she, was clearly the source of all this. But who was she? And why was she haunting him? His hands shook as he stood, the notebook clutched tightly in his fingers. As he moved toward the door, he heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps above him again, slow and deliberate. He turned toward the attic stairs, his body stiff with fear. Was it in his mind, or was something up there waiting? Without thinking, he grabbed the flashlight from his bag and slowly began his way toward the stairs. The air was thick with dread, and the house seemed to groan as if it were protesting his every step. The stairs creaked under Ethan's weight as he ascended slowly, the flashlight beam casting an eerie glow ahead of him. Each step felt like an eternity. The footsteps above him grew louder, and his pulse quickened. Who was it? He had no choice but to go up, to confront whatever, or whoever, was waiting for him. As he reached the top of the stairs, the attic door slammed shut on its own, trapping him in the small dark space. The temperature dropped instantly, and the whispers from before returned, growing louder, more distinct. "Ethan, I've been waiting." The voice was clearer now, chillingly familiar. His breath caught in his throat. He wasn't alone anymore. Ethan's heart raced as the whispers grew louder, filling the attic with an oppressive, suffocating weight. "Ethan!" The voice was no longer a whisper. It was sharp, clear, and filled with an eerie sense of familiarity. He froze, the flashlight trembling in his hand. There, standing in the shadows, was a figure. A woman. Dawn. Her hair was long, tangled, and matted with dirt, and her eyes glowed a faint, unnatural blue. She was standing perfectly still, just watching him. Her mouth moved again, but no words came out. She tilted her head to the side, and her eyes locked with his, as if she had been waiting for this moment. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. He tried to take a step back, but his legs wouldn't obey. This wasn't a nightmare. This was real. Ethan couldn't move. The woman's presence was suffocating, as if the very air in the attic had changed. A coldness crept through him, numbing his limbs. Her gaze never wavered, and he could feel her penetrating his thoughts, like she was seeing into the deepest corners of his mind. "Who are you?" Ethan whispered, his voice barely audible over the pounding of his heart. The woman's lips parted, and this time, words came through, but they weren't what he expected. "I've been waiting for you," she whispered, her voice cracking. "You were supposed to save me, Ethan. You're the one who left me to die." The ground beneath Ethan's feet seemed to give way, and he stumbled backward. His mind reeled, trying to make sense of her words. What was she talking about? Ethan stumbled backward, his back hitting the cold wooden wall. The woman's words echoed in his mind. "You're the one who left me to die." His head spun. Left her to die? He had no memory of this woman. No recollection of ever seeing her before. Panic surged through him as he looked around the attic for any clue that could explain this. But there was nothing. Who was she? A deep, gnawing fear began to settle in Ethan's stomach, something he couldn't shake. The whispers were louder now, swirling around him, growing more frantic. The temperature continued to drop, and he could feel the pressure of the house closing in on him. There was a sense of finality in the air, like this was the moment when everything would be revealed. The truth was about to come out. Ethan's mind raced, trying to piece together what was happening. He was breathing heavily now, his thoughts spinning in a chaotic mess. She was dead. He could feel it. There was no mistaking the unnatural coldness of her presence. But then, the realization hit him like a ton of bricks. She knew him. Her accusation cut through the fog in his mind. He had left her to die. Ethan took another step back, the truth dawning on him. He did remember someone from his past, a woman from his childhood. They had been close once, before everything fell apart. But what happened to her? Ethan couldn't remember. The memories were locked away, buried deep in his mind. His breathing quickened. What had he forgotten? And why was she here now? The air in the attic grew heavier, the silence broken only by the woman's voice. The woman's gaze softened for a moment, almost as if she were remembering something. "You left me, Ethan," she repeated softly. "You promised you wouldn't, but you did." The words sliced through him, and Ethan could feel his past unraveling. The truth that had been hidden for so long was now clawing its way to the surface. "You promised you would save me," she whispered again, this time with more desperation. "But you never came. You never came for me." The guilt hit him like a wave, overwhelming and suffocating. Ethan collapsed to his knees, tears welling up in his eyes as the weight of his forgotten past came crashing down on him. His mind reeled, trying to remember, but it was too much. The woman was right. He had failed her. And now she was back, seeking something from him. But what? Redemption? Revenge? Ethan felt a surge of panic as the woman's words continued to echo in his mind. "You promised you would save me, Ethan." He wanted to scream, to flee, but his legs were frozen. His breath was shallow, every inch of his body trembling with fear. The attic was suffocating now, the walls closing in as the shadowy figure moved closer. "I was just a child, Ethan," she whispered. "You were supposed to protect me." And then a memory flashed before his eyes. A memory of a summer long ago, of a girl, innocent and full of life, trapped in a fire. He had been there. He had been the one to leave her behind. The guilt washed over him, a tidal wave that threatened to drown him. "I couldn't save you," he gasped, his voice breaking. "But I tried." The room grew colder as the woman's form shifted in the shadows. Ethan's chest tightened, as though the very air around him had turned to ice. "You never came for me," she whispered again, her voice now softer, almost pleading. The weight of her words crushed him. He knew the truth now. He hadn't been able to save her. The memories, they had been locked away, buried in the deepest recesses of his mind, but they were rushing back now, overwhelming him. He had left her in that fire. He had promised her that he would come back, that he would save her, but he hadn't. He had been too scared, too weak. And now she was here, angry, vengeful, seeking what she had been denied. But what did she want from him now? For him to feel the same pain? To relive her death? Ethan's head snapped up as a cold wind rushed through the attic. His flashlight flickered, casting erratic shadows across the room. The woman's figure was now moving toward him, her steps slow but deliberate. "I've been waiting so long," she whispered, her voice cracking. "You should have come back for me, Ethan. You should have saved me." Ethan's eyes widened as her form grew clearer, her features distorted by rage and grief. "I was just a child," she repeated, her voice rising in volume. "I was a child, and you abandoned me." The room seemed to warp around him, the walls closing in as the temperature dropped even further. His mind reeled. The house was changing, the very air turning against him. The woman was no longer just a memory. She was a force, an entity, and she was angry. Ethan backed away, his mind clouded with fear and guilt. The woman's figure continued to close in on him, her movements growing more frantic. "I never should have left you," he choked out, his voice barely a whisper. "I never should have left you to die." But as he spoke the words, something inside him began to shift. The guilt was overwhelming, but it was also the key to understanding what had happened. She hadn't just died in that fire. She had been left behind, forgotten. And now she was back to make him feel the same terror, the same helplessness. Ethan reached out, his hand trembling as he tried to make contact with the woman. But as his fingers brushed against her, a searing pain shot through his arm, like he was being burned alive. He cried out, pulling his hand back, the pain lingering even as he recoiled. The room seemed to pulse with energy as Ethan's mind swirled with confusion. "Why did you leave me?" The voice echoed in his mind, each word louder than the last. "You abandoned me." And then, in the blink of an eye, everything changed. The woman's form flickered and began to distort, her features twisting into something monstrous. Ethan staggered back, his chest tight with fear. The whispers turned into a deafening roar, drowning out everything else. He could feel the room closing in around him, the walls pressing against his body, as the ghostly woman's face became a blur of rage and anguish. It was then that Ethan understood. This wasn't just about her death. This was about vengeance. He was the one who had caused this, the one who had abandoned her. And now she was going to make him pay. Ethan collapsed to his knees, the weight of his past crashing down on him. The monstrous form of the woman loomed over him, her eyes glowing with fury, her form shifting and flickering between reality and nightmare. "Please," Ethan gasped, tears streaming down his face. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to leave you." The words tumbled out in a desperate plea. The woman's gaze softened for a brief moment, and for the first time since the confrontation began, her twisted face seemed almost human. "You left me to die," she whispered. "But you never forgot, did you?" Ethan's heart hammered in his chest. It was true. He had carried the weight of her death with him all these years, but he hadn't understood how deeply it had scarred him until now. He hadn't been able to save her then, but maybe, just maybe, he could save her now from this rage, from this endless torment. For a long, agonizing moment, neither of them moved. Ethan remained on the floor, his eyes locked on the woman, pleading with every part of his being for her to understand. The atmosphere in the room shifted. The temperature began to rise, the oppressive cold lifting, as if the air itself was loosening its grip. The whispers grew softer, the woman's presence less overwhelming. "I didn't forget," Ethan whispered, his voice breaking. "I've carried the guilt. I've lived with it every day since that fire." The woman's form trembled, and she took a slow step back, as though unsure of what to do with the sudden shift in energy. Ethan stood up, his legs weak, but his resolve firm. "I couldn't save you then," he continued, his voice steadier now. "But I can't keep carrying this burden anymore." As the tension in the room began to ease, Ethan took a deep breath. For the first time in years, he didn't feel the crushing weight of guilt suffocating him. The woman's form had softened, no longer the vengeful apparition she had been. Instead, she was just a shadow of the past, a broken soul seeking peace. "I am sorry," Ethan said again, the words almost a prayer. "I never wanted this for you. I never wanted you to suffer like this." The woman's eyes, once burning with fury, seemed to flicker with something else: sadness, longing, and the faintest trace of understanding. She looked at him one last time before her form began to fade, slowly dissolving into the shadows of the attic. Ethan closed his eyes, exhaling deeply, as the room began to feel warmer, the oppressive sense of dread lifting. The ghost had gone, and with it, a part of the burden he had carried for so long. Ethan stood alone in the attic, the weight of what had just transpired settling into his bones. The air was still, almost peaceful. For the first time since he had moved into this house, the space didn't feel suffocating. The silence wasn't oppressive. The house, too, seemed to breathe easier. The woman had gone, and with her, the curse of his guilt had lifted. Ethan didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, he felt the possibility of moving forward. He took a long, deep breath, letting the air fill his lungs, and turned to leave the attic. The house felt like it was releasing its hold on him, as if the very walls were sighing in relief. There was no more shadow in the corners, no more cold whispers. He was free. As Ethan descended the stairs and left the attic behind, he felt the last remnants of the past slipping away. The guilt, the fear, the unspoken sorrow. They had all been confronted and released. It wasn't a perfect ending. He would carry the memory of the woman with him forever, but he had made peace with her. And with himself. He stepped into the living room, the morning light filtering through the window. The house was still old, still creaky, but it no longer felt like a prison. It was just a house. A home. For the first time in years, Ethan could breathe again. The next few days passed in a quiet daze. Ethan tried to return to normal, but something had shifted. The house no longer felt oppressive, but there was a strange sense of lingering. It wasn't fear anymore. It was a memory. Every creak of the floorboards, every gust of wind seemed to carry a whisper of the woman who had haunted him. But there was no longer any malice in those whispers. It was as though she had left a piece of herself behind, something that would always stay with him. One morning, as Ethan was about to leave for work, he stood in front of the attic door one last time. He placed his hand on the cold handle, staring at the dark stairwell. The house had given him peace, but it had also taught him something. No matter how far you run, the past will always find its way back to you. It was up to you to either face it or keep running. He had faced it, and now he was ready to move on. Ethan stepped away from the door and walked to the front door, his bag slung over his shoulder. As he opened the door, a gust of wind blew in, carrying with it the scent of the world outside. It was the first time in a long while that he truly felt free. He closed the door behind him, walking out into the bright sunlight, a deep sense of closure settling over him. The woman in the attic was gone, but her memory would always be with him. That's the way things worked. You couldn't erase the past, but you could choose how you let it shape you. As he walked down the driveway toward his car, Ethan looked up at the house one last time. It stood silent, almost waiting for him to say goodbye. And as he climbed into his car, he did. As Ethan drove away, he couldn't shake the feeling that the house was still watching him, but this time, it wasn't with malice. It was with a strange sense of peace. A soft breeze blew through the open window of the car, and for the first time in years, he felt lighter. The guilt, the fear, the regret, all of it seemed to dissipate, carried away with the wind. It wasn't just the house that had changed. He had changed too. He had confronted his past, and now it was time for him to look toward the future. The road ahead seemed long, but it no longer seemed impossible. Whatever came next, Ethan was ready. Weeks passed and the house remained quiet. Ethan never went back to the attic. He had made his peace with the past, and there was no need to revisit it. The whispers had stopped, the weight of the house had lifted, and the once ominous presence was gone. But sometimes, late at night, when the wind was just right, Ethan would hear a soft creak or the faint sound of footsteps. And for a brief moment, he would think of the woman in the attic, her sad, pleading eyes, and the memory of her sorrowful voice. But it wasn't fear he felt. It was a quiet understanding. He had done what he could, and now, so had she. One evening, as Ethan was about to close his eyes, he thought he heard a soft whisper, almost too faint to catch. "Thank you, Ethan." It was a fleeting moment, as if a part of the woman's spirit had finally found peace. Ethan closed his eyes, letting the quiet of the night surround him. For the first time in years, he felt completely at ease. The past had finally been laid to rest, and the future stretched out before him, wide, open, and full of possibilities.